What would you like to share about James
The
Burd?
thing I would like to share about Jamesburg, do not mess with Miss Mari's friends.
I love Jamesburg because I like Miss Mason and I have friend Maddie, so we play all day long.
All right. What would you like to say about James Burd?
This was a good school, and I like all the special teachers, and this was my favorite class so far.
One thing I like in Jamesburg is I miss Wetzel and I miss Mason.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
One thing I'll miss about James Burd is all the friends I've made, and Miss Martin, who was really affectionate.
I like for Jamesburg is all the teachers that I love the most is Miss Mason and Miss Shimon, because I like Miss Shimon because she drinks too much caffeine and she goes crazy, and also one thing I like about school is about my friend Amelia. Me and her play on the playground all the time on the swing.
All right.
One thing I like about Jamesburg is my teachers that I had all through the years. One thing that I like about Jamesburg is Miss Mason and Miss Olson.
What I like about Jamesburg is my friends.
A couple things that I'm going to miss about Jamesburg is the teachers, my friends, and the three teachers I'm especially going to miss is Mrs. Olson, Mr. Acurdy, Mrs. Acurdy, and Miss Mason.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
Things that I'm going to miss is all my teachers, but one teacher I'm going to miss a lot is Mr. McCurdy.
Okay.
One thing I like about Jamesburg is Jim.
One thing I like the Jamesburg is my teachers, my friends, and the gym.
All right.
And I think about Jamesburg is I like my teacher and I like the whole school.
One thing I would like to say about Jamesburg is that my favorite teachers and all the friends and memories I made.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
I would like to say about Jamesburg is all the teachers and friends I've made.
All right.
One thing I'm going to miss about Jamesburg is all the teachers and the friends I made, and my favorite teacher is Mrs. Morgan.
One thing about Jamesburg that I like is gym and art.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
It's a good school, and my favorite teachers is Miss Mason.
All right.
My favorite thing about Jamesburg is that the teachers are really nice here, and that my favorite teacher is Mrs. Rosemary. What I like about Jamesburg is my friend and Miss Mason and Miss Wetzel.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
What I will miss about Jamesburg is all my teachers and all my friends.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
That Miss Mason is my favorite teacher, and I like Miss Olson as my teacher, and I like Miss Henson as my teacher.
Okay. What would you like to say about James Burd?
I like about Jamesburg is Miss Taylor and the people who my friends and the people who like Miss Taylor.
What do you want to share about James Burd?
So what I want to share about Jamesburg is all my teachers. They're the best. But there's one that's the best of all teachers. That's Mrs. Staver. Pretty good. Peace, James Burd.
One thing I would miss about James Burd is all my friends and all the teachers that I spend with time.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
Something I miss about James Burd is like all the teachers I've had, Miss Burd, Miss Schumann, and Miss Eflin, and I'll also miss seeing my younger cousins.
Nice.
Thing that I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all my friends, Taposh, Alice, and Amish, and all the kind teachers. And I miss Mr. McCurdy, and I'm gonna see all my friends in the intermediate school.
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is having lunch with my friends and snack time.
Something I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all my teachers and my friends.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
I'm gonna miss about James Burd. I'm gonna miss all my friends. I'm gonna miss all the nice people that were in this school, and all the teachers that were being nice and teach us lots of things, and they're very respectful.
All right.
Something I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all my teachers, and I'm gonna miss all of my friends, and I'm gonna miss, like, there's a lot of good teachers here. I think I'm gonna miss, like, all my friends in my class. I'm gonna miss, like, I'm gonna miss all the things that we did here, all the activities, and that's it.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
What I want to say about James Burd is I'm gonna miss my teachers and all of my friends. One thing I like about James Burd is that I've went through a lot of teachers, and I'm gonna miss Miss Patel, Miss Eflin, Miss Henson, and Mrs. Hawkinsmith, and Miss Lloyd.
Excellent.
Something I'm gonna miss about James Burd is my teachers, because especially at Miss Boyles and Mr. McCurdy, because Mr. McCurdy is gonna and this year, like, he's gonna retire this year, and Miss Boyles is gonna come back next year because she had her baby.
All right.
Something I would like to say about James Burd is that I'm really going to miss my second grade teacher, Mrs. Wetzel, and I'm very grateful for all of my other teachers, kindergarten, first grade, and third grade.
Awesome.
Something I like to say about James Burd is, like, all the people are very nice here, and I'm gonna miss all my teachers.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
Something I'll say about James Burd is, like, there's kind teachers around here, like Miss Wetzel and Mrs. Burd.
All right. What do you want to say about James Burd?
Is that so I like being here because, like, all the friends I made, they are nice, and also, like, I'm thinking of something to say. And I also like the art. I like everything about this school.
All right.
And I like the books too here.
Okay, excellent.
Miss about James Burd is all the friends I've made and basically all the teachers. And one day, I just hope this school will change the world in a good way.
All right.
Something I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all my teachers, Miss Wetzel and Mr. McCurdy. Something that I'm gonna miss about James Burd is my first grade teacher, who is retiring this year.
All right.
What I'm gonna miss about James Burd is I'm gonna miss all of my friends, and I'm gonna miss all of my family in the house. I'm gonna miss everybody from James Burd, and I'm gonna miss all of my old teachers.
All right. What would you like to say about James Burd?
I would like to say that I'll miss my teachers, and I'll miss my teachers like Miss Eflin and Miss Fair and Miss Burt, Miss Rosenberry.
Okay.
One thing about James Burd that I like is I like being with my friends and my teachers.
James Burd is the teachers and the friends, because they helped me go all the way to 3rd grade.
One thing that I love about James Burd is that
all of the teachers are nice and they get to learn us about new things that we haven't learned about.
All right.
One thing that I like about James Burd is all the nice teachers and all the specials that we have and all the things that our PTO and our principal does for us.
Like about James Burd is all my friends that I've met, all my teachers, and I have one really great friend that has helped me out from kindergarten the whole way to the whole way to third grade, and also subscribe to Poke Boy Plays on YouTube.
One thing I like about James Burd is all the teachers and all my friends.
One thing I like about James Burd is all the awesome teachers they have here, and they can really help you be better and smarter.
Something that I like about James Burd is my friends and my teachers and my reading teacher too, and that's it.
One thing I love about James Burd is my teachers because they're really nice and my friends.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
One thing that I really liked at James Burd is playing with my friends, and I'm gonna really miss my reading teacher because he's really nice and he's really helping me with reading.
Awesome.
The thing I like about James Burd is our principal, and I made lots of friends, and I like all the first grade teachers and second grade. The one thing about James Burd I love is the teachers were helpful to me, and so as my friends. I made new friends every year, and the teachers I had were Mrs. Shatley, and she was fun when I was in the school, first day of school.
All right.
One thing that I like about James Burd is all of my friends and all the wonderful teachers, and it's just a wonderful place.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
The thing that I like about James Burd is that I made so many friends and all of the teachers are really nice. And
One thing that I loved that James Burd was the PSSAs. I made a bunch of friends. They were good to me, and I felt like James Burd was the best place to be.
My favorite thing about James Burd is my friends, and I really like the teachers, especially my second grade teacher, Mrs. Boyles, and they make the lunch really well. I like it.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
That all the nice, wonderful teachers is that one thing is about James Burd is that the teachers are really nice.
When I think about James Burd, it's an awesome place. I think all the teachers here are nice. All my friends I made are nice. I gotta say, this school is an awesome place.
And what do you want to say about James Burd?
One thing I will miss about James Burd is my friends and teachers that I've had.
All right, excellent.
One thing that I would miss about James Burd is my teachers. The thing I'll miss about James Burd is all my friends in second grade and first grade, and I'll miss all my teachers because they helped me.
Excellent.
The thing that I'm gonna miss about James Burd is my little sister and my best friend always.
Okay.
one thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is my teachers because they were so nice to me along the whole school year.
All right.
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is my friends, my teachers, and seeing my brother in the hallway.
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is seeing my brother in the hallways.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
One thing I miss about James Burd is seeing my brother in the hallways and missing my teachers.
All right.
One thing I'll miss in James is my first grade teacher, second grade teacher, and my third grade teachers.
One thing I'll miss about James Burd is all my friends and teachers. One thing I'll miss about James Burd is my friend Jensen and Sebastian.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all the teachers and all my friends.
All right.
One thing I miss about James Burd is I met all my friends.
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all my friends.
One thing I'm going to miss about James Burd is my teacher, Miss Ship, because she's been nice to me ever since I first came here.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
One thing I miss about James Burd is my friends and my teachers.
The thing I'm going to miss about James Burd is seeing my brother in the halls and my teachers.
The thing I miss about James Burd are my teachers and my friends.
James Burd is seeing my sister and the teachers.
The thing I'm going to miss about James Burd is my teachers.
James Burd is that everyone's mostly nice, and I'll miss my brother.
One thing, the person I'm gonna miss is all my friends and also my friend Xavier. What I would miss about James Burd is all the nice students that were here. As I said on my first day, I was always shy, so I think that that James Bird's a lovely place because of the people.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
I'm gonna miss my sister because she's in 2nd grade, and when I go to 4th grade, I won't be able to see her anymore. And
What would you like to say about James Burd?
My favorite thing about James Burd is Miss Taylor, Miss Chris, Miss Papson, Mr. McCurdy, and Miss Schrader. And all my friends are Addie, Hansel, Asa, and Nevaeh sometimes, and Alice sometimes.
Some things I'm going to miss about James Burd are my teachers, Miss Asper, Miss Hawkins Smith, Miss Wetzel, Miss Kristen, Miss Taylor, and I'm gonna miss all my besties, Montea, Risu, Alice, Addie, and Nevaeh, and that's it.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
One thing I'll say about James Burd is that I'm gonna miss Miss Martin and Miss Taylor, and I'm gonna miss Lily and Addie and Aiden and all of my friends. I'll miss Miss Olsen and Miss Taylor and Alice.
So one thing I'll miss about James Burd is I'll miss my best friend Depsana, Elena, and Nevaeh, and Montea, and Lily. And then I'll miss my teacher, Miss Taylor, and Miss Chris, and Miss Henson, and Rosenberry.
One thing I'll miss about James Burd is all my friends, especially Addie, Kala, Montea, Lily, Kenley, and Dipsana, because they are really good friends, and I hope they'll be there too.
One thing I'll miss about James Burd is Mr. McCurdy, Miss Taylor, Miss Chris, Miss Boyles, and Miss Lloyd, and all my friends.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
One thing I would like to say about James Burd is that I'll miss my teacher, Miss Taylor, and my friends, especially Dubsana, because she was a really good friend.
One thing I would miss about James Burd is Miss Taylor, Miss Chris, Miss Piles, Miss Bear, and Miss Schrader.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is Miss Piles, Miss Wetzel, Miss Taylor, and Miss Stewart. What I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all my friends, and all Miss Taylor, Miss Chris, and Miss Rosenberry, and Miss Schumann.
What would you like to say about James Burd?
That I'll miss all the teachers and friends I made.
One thing about James Burd is I'm gonna miss Miss Piles, Miss Chris, and all the teachers, plus Miss Taylor.
One thing about I want to miss James Burd is about my friends and my teachers.
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is all the teachers.
One thing I'm going to miss about James Burd is Miss Chris, Miss Taylor, and friends.
What would you like to share about James Burd?
One thing I'll miss about James Burd is all the teachers, especially Miss Taylor, Miss Boyles, and Miss Lloyd, and Miss Wetzel.
One thing I'm gonna miss about this from when I first came here to now is all the friends and teachers I made
and all of the memories I made throughout kindergarten to third grade. I made all those memories and the friends I've had and the teachers.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
I am lucky for my friends. I will miss them. And I love my teachers that I had in kindergarten, first grade, second, and third grade. In kindergarten, I had Miss Popson. Second grade, I had Miss Fair. And third grade, I have Miss Smarts.
All right.
Hi. One thing that I will miss from James Burd is my teachers and my friends.
Hi, one thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is probably all the teachers because I've had a lot of help from a lot of the teachers and I'm gonna miss all my friends and all the memories.
One thing I want to say about James Burd is I am gonna miss all the people who is in James Burd, and I'm gonna miss my sister.
What do you want to say about James Burd?
I will miss all the teachers at James Burd and Miss Piles. I will miss, and I'll miss the third grade leadership team.
All right.
One thing I'm gonna miss is my best friend, Athena.
One thing I'm gonna miss about James Burd is Mrs. Martz and Max I made along the way from first grade to all the way to third grade.
And what do you want to say about James Burd?
Two things I would like to say is I'm gonna miss all my teachers, especially Miss Merton, because she was always there for me when I needed her, and all my friends.
One thing I miss about James Burd is the teachers, my teacher, Mrs. March, and all my friends.
What's something that you'd like to say about James Burd?
One thing that I like about James Burd is that we get lots of recess, and that I like all the teachers, and I'm grateful for all my